Welcome to Locked In, your source for college football intel. We want to give a big thank you to everyone who has subscribed to our channel this month. We've had a blast talking football with you. If you enjoy this video and want to see more great content, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Even more, share our videos with your friends. Again, thanks for being locked in. Yeah, I think that that's really a good way to put it. There were they they just got beat. I mean that's really all you can say. And I think that the things that you said, it all came to haunt them. Lack of physicality. The play calling was really weak in a lot of places, and it hurt them. Now they were still in the ball game. I think that they had a chance, but I think that they had some key things working against them, and it didn't fall the way that that they thought that it should. Now, with that being said, could you still gripe? Sure, you could. 29-1. Why not? But I think that one of the things that if you come down and you want to say something about this ball game, um, if I had to give a hard opinion, if I were on the committee, the thing that I would say is I really don't care that they're 29-1. We're concerned with this season, and I understand that in the larger scheme that hurts. But what I saw, especially what I saw going back and watching this game again, um, I would have a hard time placing Georgia in the playoff. So I understand where they're coming from. That might not be what the Georgia fan wants to hear, but I think that if you go back and you watch this game objectively, uh, they were a lesser team than Alabama, at least on this day. And I think that one of the I guess not necessarily conversation pieces, but one of the statements that I've heard said so many times is that Georgia would have won the national championship if they just put them in there. And you know, regardless of what folks thinks, you can hold your opinion. I can hold my opinion. I'm telling you right now, Michigan whips Georgia. I don't see Georgia beating that team. And maybe they keep it close, like it's an Alabama type game. But I think at the end of the day, the confusion that you saw with the bunches, the ability that Alabama had to run the football on Georgia, I don't think they could do it. And in the way that defense that looks so similar to some of the things that Michigan does, but just not quite as good, how it shut down the Georgia passing game. I don't think Georgia could stand up to that team. And some people might not like to hear it, but they're going to hear it from me over and over again. Michigan is way better than a lot of people are giving them credit for. And I don't think Georgia was quite as good as a lot of people gave them credit for. That's my final word on it. Rev, you got anything to say?
I kind of want to echo the same sentiment. There was something that really bothered me this year, and it's an every year thing, and we've talked about it, off recording multiple times. Last year doesn't matter. At least it shouldn't. It shouldn't matter, and it doesn't matter to me. I don't care that they went 29-1. It's not the same team. I mean, you can go by stats, you can go by players, you can go by whatever you want to. That 21 team, that defense that was so dominant, that's not the 23 team. The 22 team that still was dominant, that still came away with a national championship, it's not the 23 team. And I heard all year long, they haven't lost. They won 2 titles. You can't remove them from number one, like even earlier on in the season. And yeah, you can, because they didn't look like the number one team in the country ever. And they played Ole Miss. The Ole Miss game, they looked like the best team they had looked all year. That was the best game they played. But other than that game, there were so many times this year where it was like, you're going to tell me that that's the number one team. When you got Michigan, who's outright dominating people, and you got and earlier on, you had other teams. You had Ohio State, who I didn't think looked like the number one team, but their wins at least said that they were. And then you had other teams who were up in the top that just looked better. That week to week they played better than Georgia. Now at the end of the stretch, when it mattered most, when Georgia played a tougher schedule, when they played Mizzou and they played Tennessee, they played Ole Miss, they won those games, and they deserve to be in a top spot to play themselves into a playoff. I don't disagree with that at all. They were a heck of a team this year, but it was not the same Georgia team from past years, and they shouldn't get credit for it because it wasn't them. Now, looking at this game and looking at other games, I mean, we want to talk about if we're going to talk about individual games, every top tier team this year played at least one bad game. I could argue that they all played multiple bad games, even including Michigan, who won the daggum whole thing. They've all played rough games, and they've all had moments where they don't look like the best. So Georgia fans, same goes to you. You had games that you didn't look very good. But then when it mattered most to overcome any adversity, to overcome injury, to overcome maybe being a little bit out physical, do you get the win at the end of the day? For their whole regular season, they did that. Were they a snap or two away from possibly losing to Missouri? Yes. Were they a snap or two away from maybe, dropping one here, but they didn't. They won all the way through. But then in this SEC championship game, where it mattered most, win and you're in, they couldn't do it. And we're going to talk about them losing a physical battle against Alabama. They would have absolutely lost a physical battle against Michigan because Michigan outmanned Alabama, who outmanned Georgia. Now, I know that the transitive property doesn't work all the way in college football. When we talk about toughness scale, Michigan would have been a little bit too much for Georgia to handle. That's just what I see when I watch this film and I watch Georgia not be able to handle certain things that Alabama threw at them. I don't see them being able to all of a sudden handle Michigan in a similar aspect. So I'm with you. I don't agree that they would have won the national championship if you just thrown them in there. I think that they're a really good team. I think that they deserve all the, a ton of accolades. But to argue that they deserve to be there over these other teams or that they would wax Michigan, I think that's a little bit crazy. I understand where that opinion comes from. I understand where the bias comes from. But when you watch the film and you see this loss against Alabama, they were in the game the whole way through and they were leading at one point and they were, within two scores the whole time. But Alabama always was able to do enough to keep Georgia out, to not let them all the way back in to have a chance, to beat them. And Alabama did enough to overcome it. So, when I look at this, Georgia, this is something that I think is kind of lost on people that this Georgia team is so different. They're not the teams of the past. This is a young team. Yeah, they had their stars and they had their older guys. We kept talking about, you heard Chance reference how many young guys they had playing in the SEC championship game. That's a big deal. And that's so, I'm down on the Georgia team of 2023, but I'm up on the 2024 team because you talk about a lot of experience that those young guys just had against one of the best teams in the country that they just narrowly lost to. Now you transfer that to next year where that all of that experience, all of that battle tested, toughness that you get in the SEC champ game, that's now put into your offseason this year. You know what is required of you to beat the best in your conference. And now you have a whole slew of great players who are very young getting new experiences to go into the next season to try and dominate. So while I didn't think that 23 Georgia was as dominant anywhere close to their years past, I looked to next year thinking, man, they have a really good shot at it because they had a lot of young guys who are going to come with a force and something to play for next year. Like they're not being affected by all this crazy transfer portal stuff. They're all coming back next year to prove something. So, Georgia fans who are watching this and who made it to the end of this, yeah, we're a little bit down on this last season of Georgia. But next season of Georgia, I look at this, championship game. I'm thinking, man, they play that close against a good Alabama team with all those young guys. They're going to have something to say next year.
And you know
And you
what?
know,
Uh, I'll add on that before we end it, and that's like I say, I do think that they're probably a better team than Texas and Washington. Now, should they have been placed in the playoffs over them? Probably not, because they did lose to Alabama. So now, were they the better team? Sure, I think so. I said it at the beginning of the year. The only team that can beat Georgia is Alabama. The only team that can beat Michigan, though, is Georgia. Do I think that's true? I think that we probably would have had a good chance, and Mike could have come out with a victory against them. Just given the extra month after the SEC championship for all the guys to heal up and be
mhm.
healthy going into the playoffs, it's a big key thing because you get 4 weeks before you play your semi game. And Georgia, say they won against Alabama, or say they even was put at the 4 seed and had to play Michigan first round, they have 4 weeks to prepare for a team. Said when you give Kirby Smart and them boys 4 weeks to prepare for a team, you'll see what happened to Michigan last year. You'll see what happened to Michigan the year before that. You'll see what happened to TCU. You'll see what happened to Alabama the year before that. You give them boys weeks to prepare. You give them boys rest and motivation, especially coming after a loss against Alabama. Them boys would have been hungry. And I think they have the players and the athleticism to beat them. I think it's a very close game with Michigan. It's really just whoever makes the mistakes. And, Georgia can make them mistakes, but Michigan could very easily make them mistakes. I just think it's whichever way the ball turns that day. And, I'd hope it be in Georgia's favor, but you never know.
No, I think you're right to make that argument for them. Um, and the thing that I would say, on Georgia's behalf, and here's why I think they wouldn't have. There's no there's no transformational player on Georgia's defense right now. Malachi Stark does everything that he can, but that's a young team. And, and that's even like injuries aside, that side of the ball's young. And the pass rush, I don't think is there. That's the thing that I think separates them. Like, I think if you looked at it statistically, the one thing that I think that I'd like to see Georgia over this offseason, and I think that some of the things that we pointed out here tonight, they suggest that they're there. Jalen Walker, that guy can get after the quarterback. Same thing. His name's
Michael
leaving me.
Williams.
Yeah, Michael Williams, that guy can get after it on the defensive line. Uh, Xavier Sori, I like watching him coming out of the defensive
Think
backfield,
he
like how
transferred.
they did he? Well, that
Yeah.
sucks. But those two guys up front, Georgia needs an absolutely great pass rush because, in my opinion, the thing that really marked them as being so great for those 3 or so years when they were on top of it, their defensive front was impossible. And I think that these young guys that they have coming in next year, because both those guys, am I right in saying that Williams and Walker are both sophomores?
Yeah, that or one might be a redshirt sophomore or junior. I know they could have went to the draft if they wanted to. At
But
least
I
one of
think that,
them.
I think if you've got those two guys in the front of that defense, I think that you've got a much more solid team than what they had this year on defense. And so I'm looking forward to that. That's the thing that makes me hopeful for Georgia is
Mhm.
to, whenever you see those like really bright plays that maybe they've got something there and they're just a year away from it. Cause I mean, at the same time, I think Beck does a good job. I want to see the play calling get better. That's the one thing just as an outside observer is, I mean, they've got to get better at that aspect of the game because I mean, I'm not a Georgia person and I don't trust what Mike Bobo does, and I can only imagine if you're a committed fan, because sometimes it looks so good and then sometimes it just you're shooting yourself in the foot, but it was what it was. That was that was like you said, it was going to be hard for them to make the playoff after losing to Alabama. And so, they got an off season to think about it. And I think they're going to come back strong and we'll see what they can do next year.
Yeah, and I was gonna say I think they have some young D linemen in who got some playing time this year, and I think if they come in next year and they let them play, you got Jaw Jarrett, Jordan Hall, then you even have some guys coming in this year in this class that are really good and could even see snaps as freshmen. And then you got all the older guys that are staying. So we got like three older guys that are staying instead of going to the draft. So I mean, hopefully that DL gets a little better. I'd like to see it be a young DL next year. Probably some of them redshirt freshman boys in there. In the interior, I think put them in there. They're hungry, they're explosive, they're big. I think they can make a real impact that you haven't seen this year from the interior of the D line. They were good at least for the most part at run stopping. Even when it came to Alabama, they held them in the interior for the most part. I think Chaz is a big weakness on the edge, and he's coming back for another year. I'd like to see someone come in to replace him. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, I know Kirby's going to play who he thinks is going to be the best player. And they're really going to have to lose them positions. Not really
Sure.
not really gonna have a chance to, gain them. So I mean, I think if Chaz comes in and loses that position, or one of them boys in the middle, whether it be Waltow or Stackhouse, one of them comes in and loses that position, I think that can honestly help us out. But we'll keep up to date with Georgia and have a preview before the season. And I guess that's where we'll leave it. Is that the future looks bright for Georgia, especially if they can capture Caleb Downs, which I think they probably will by the time this video is released. And I think the back end of that defense will complement so well with the front end coming up in the next year, especially with all the linebacking talent we have, along with the young DL that we hope to see in there next year. Now, with that all being said, this is Lock, Rev, and Chance. Stay locked in, everyone.
Everyone here at Locked In wants to say thank you to all of you who have subscribed to, liked, and commented on our channel. We've got a blast bringing great college football analysis to you. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button. If you want to share your thoughts, we'd love to see your comments. Till next time, stay locked in.